Hello YouTube, this is Boston Best 0407, and this video is going to be a tag on, a side note if you will, to my last video, which was a response to Stardust's Men Will Not Change. And I decided to create this format, that's technically different than, say, the addendum, whatever. It's really just going to be, something separate from what I discussed in that video, but connected back to it, and I did use this format already. It's something I created myself. So anyway, to specify some points about what I did say in that last video, I think much of what I did say speaks for itself. I think men are obviously the more adaptable sex. I think just really just using a priori logic and reasoning you can figure that out. And while we seem to perceive the opposite of it, the end of men, women somehow, it's all perception. And it's really, I think, it clearly shown the fact that women had to use the government and all these other things, whereas men have been adapting on their own, and that obviously led to modernity. I mean, we wouldn't have modernity if men were inadaptable, to be an inventor, to use tools, all these things that men would have been using in an ancestral environment is geared men's brains to adapt. And men understand the idea of maturity, where women seem to, go into the workforce and want the workforce to change to them. All that I essentially said, and it's pretty much, I didn't go into it as much as I wanted to. I didn't really get to maybe reinforce some of the points I made. But I think it pretty much speaks for itself. So I did feel like I had to justify. And this is where this video is going to differ from my last video. Something I said in the tail end of my last video, and something I also did say that was related to this in another video. And this was one, that women need sex more than men, and that two, women loved and needed men. And this conflicts with one, the blue pill view of the world, where men need sex more than women, men are addicted to sex, etc. Then there's the MGTOW, or the MRM perspective, that women don't really need men, and that men are obviously, they're disposable. It's like sort of it's sort of the reverse of the end of men thing. Basically saying that women don't need men, and men are disposable, and women use men, all these different things. Well, I'm gonna argue and postulate here that this is all, again, just mere perception, and that perceptions can be very flawed, and you have to have a little bit more going on upstairs, not intellectually, but intuitively, to really get it and to see what's actually going on. Now, in order to really explain this well, you'd have to have a great deal of psychological background that I would give my own. This is really my own conjecture I'm talking about, not anything any professionals would say. But I don't want to really get into all that because it's complicated. So I'm just going to break it down very simple. And really, when we are looking at an issue like this, we should look at the differences between male and female biology, how they relate to the environment, things like that. And when you look at a woman, when you think of it, think of the woman. Life comes from the woman. Sex comes from the woman. Women are in a sense the physical embodiment of sex. So the female body is a sexual object, and this is not something that can be helped. It's simply the way things are. If our species seeks to produce, then the female body becomes a sexual object. But the thing is important is that the problem is that it's not men objectifying the woman. Women seek to objectify themselves, and I believe that women derive a great deal of sexual satisfaction from the objectification of the self, whereas men derive in sex, they derive pleasure from physical stimulation. Women derive sex from all this other stuff. When women buy clothes, and women dress themselves, and women wear certain types of clothing, makeup, her femininity, her womanhood, all these different things aspects of how she derives sexual satisfaction. It's all part of her sexuality and how she, it's how it all relates to how she expresses herself, how she relates to the man. All these other things, the roles she plays, all these things are a part of female sexuality. Whereas a man, sex is the equivalent of an ejaculation, and that's essentially it. This is also why women, in marriage, for example, would get so frustrated. This cliche, for example, of the man sleeping with his wife and then rolling over. That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. For women, sex is not just sex. It's a much bigger thing. They have a much deeper, because men basically are physiological. They are physical, and this is something that I think a lot of women probably don't like to hear. Women are just as physical as men in terms of being attracted to a nice looking guy, and men can be just as psychological as women in that they can have their own sexual fetishes and fantasies and things like that. They're all part of the mental as opposed to the merely physical aspects of sex. But women have this more than men. Ultimately, sex is a much bigger thing than what it is for man. But how this relates to this is just purely seen in the differences between the kind of pornography men and women like. This has been noticed before by people, in which the male likes just the physical act of sex to watch it, whereas a woman wants a little bit more to it, a little bit more romance, a little bit more of a storyline, a little bit more of there's more to it. It's not just porn, but it's something aesthetic as well. Women are attracted to this kind of thing. All this is again the aspects of female sexuality, but it doesn't even really say anything about whether or not men or women like sex more. Far from it. It still doesn't say anything, but when you look at it like this, you realize that sex has psychological power, I think, for women in this regard. It's just a much bigger thing than the merely physical. This is probably why you have this thing where women don't think about sex as much as men do. It's that sex for them is going on all the time, so they're not thinking about it. Whereas a man who has sex, as Chris Rock once pointed out, was lucky. When a man realizes he's gonna get laid, he's like, oh, this is my lucky day. This is probably why men think about sex more, why the pornography industry seeks to varying degrees to kind of exploit male sexuality for its own profit and gain, and all these other things like that. But again, how could I justify saying that women needed sex more than men? Well, let's look at it like this. Because life comes from the woman, if the woman wants to reproduce, she needs the man's semen. She needs the man's contribution. She cannot reproduce without it. So she has to go out in some way to find it. But she can't go out and approach the man directly. She cannot seek to, in a sense, emasculate the man, and she cannot seek to, if she wants to have sex with him. She cannot seek to at the same time. She needs to bring the man in. She needs to figure out some way to bring the man in. And this is the problem. I think in an ancestral environment, men would have been all out hunting. We would have been out doing whatever we wanted, basically hunting and doing the things that interest us. And the females would be back at home, near the tribal area, the home base or whatever you would call it. I don't know what the word would call it for a tribal. I would just say home base. But they would be sitting back at home, and in a situation like this, the wild male, for example, out there in the world, what would really instinct him outside of the physical act? What would really instinct him? Bad word. Really make him want to come back and be with her or whatever. There's no instinct to do that. There isn't even really an instinct for him to even approach the woman outside of the physical beauty. But even then, it could just very well amount to admiration of the physical beauty itself, and not even anything even remotely related to commitment. And so women, I think on this level, I think on a deep primordial level in this regard, not only because of this fact, but also because if men went out into the wilderness, they may never come back, and so they'd be stuck on their own if this happened. And so on a deep primordial level, women, I think, feel the loss of men. I think women feel the loss of men to a great degree. And much of the domestication of men, which has gone on over the past thousands of years, which has led to modernity, where men are not in their wild self, their primordial self, free to do what they wanted, but have to be held down to responsibility, and this becomes a symbol of manhood. All of which I think it really adapts us to the needs of women more than anything else, and to the environment. Really, I think to women is an expression not of this desire to control men per se, but this, and it's possessive and it's all these things, but it's not the malevolent thing I think we men think of it. I think it's much more benign than that, and it can be taken malevolent form. There's no doubt about it, but I do think it's much more benign. I think on a deep primordial level, women are afraid of the loss of men. Yes, I said it. I think women are afraid of the loss of men. They're afraid that men will go off into the environment, die, or just leave them there, and they will never be seen again. And so while women have their problems, their disloyalties, their fickleness, and things like that, I think in this regard, I think this is something that does affect women to a large degree. So from there, I think this is where the symbol of the seductress comes in. The reason why women need sex more than men in this regard is the seductress. What would be if men were just so sexual and needed sex so much? What would be the need of a seductress? What would be the need of the woman to be seductive and have these kind of things that are all designed to pull the man in? It's because women need sex more than men do. Women need men more than men need women, and this whole process of being the seductress is to essentially manipulate a man into her hands. And women, I think, outside of the feminist indoctrination, outside of the aspects of the corrupt aspects of what we live in today, this monstrosity of feminism and this female demagoguery that seems to go on among feminists, convincing women to hate men, that men are evil, this patriarchy and all these crazy things. I think women. We know this. We just know this, that women are more romantic. That women have the reputation of being more romantic. That women are afraid they have a problem with men being able to commit. And I think after 1,000 years, I think a lot of the logic behind it and the reasons for the way women behave has been lost on women, which is why we have patriarchy and the aspects of female nature which are vengeful, corrupt, or the hypergamy, or all these different things. The original logic behind all this has been lost, and the women also seem to just want to really throw away their own nature to a large degree. So that also leads to unhappiness, because the thing is, when you look at the most feminist societies like Sweden or Norway, women are chronically unhappy. I saw a video the other day, which I there's like probably the second or third time I actually watched it. I watched it before, and it explains how women have had the most opportunities that they've had, but they're the most unhappy. Feminism has done so much for women, yet women are chronically unhappy, because I think it goes against. A lot of it is forcing women to be something that they're just not, and it's forcing women to hate themselves in a neurotic and unhealthy way, which is sad and unfortunate in its own right. But that's feminism. But that being said, again, go back to the seductress. If you look at, say, scandals with famous men who get wrapped up with some woman. It's often blamed on the man, for example. But what was he doing before he came across the woman? He was going off and doing what he does. He was involved in his career. He was doing all these, like Bill Clinton or what's his name, General Petraeus, for example. What were they doing? They were pursuing their careers. They were living their lives, and then the woman comes along, and there's that seductress dynamic. that's where a lot of the folklore, like there's like the like sort of that witchy kind of thing, a woman in a black magic kind of brings a man in, the succubus, you know, the all these bits and pieces of folklore which are now misogynistic and expressions of patriarchal propaganda and all these different things. So we're supposed to shut up and ignore these things. But the folklore regarding the woman and this power that she has over the man, it's all comes from her. It's pure black magic in a sense, because it doesn't start out with the man wanting it. It's the creation of it. Women create this need in men, and that's really I think why women need sex more than men. Women, I think, need love more than men. Women need these things, and women also other aspects of their sexuality are things like women need to feel sexy. Women need to feel loved. The idea, for example, that Stardust mentioned in his video about men needing to be validated is simply not true. It's women psychologically projecting this onto men and saying it almost like emotional propaganda that the woman seems to engage in that says this. And much of our understanding of men and how men are being treated in this society is based on this emotional propaganda that women are putting out there, that feminists are putting out there. And it's not entirely true. When you look at this, like I said, women need to be needed. Women need validation. Women worry about these things far more than men do. Women, I think, have far more sensitive egos and far more sensitivity to these sorts of things than men do, and that even that dare I say it, they hurt easily for all these other reasons. But it all starts out from this this perception, and women create all these things which are then put back on men, and men go along with it because men get a certain deal of satisfaction, out of this themselves. There is something satisfying, there's something fascinating about the feminine mystique, if you will, and so men can fall for it. But men ultimately they don't need these things. They've been conditioned to need these things by women. And so all this stuff aside, when you take it all down and you really blue pill it, because it's all blue pill stuff. All blue pill thought ultimately comes from the female, I think. And you get out of this and you take the red pill and really take the red pill and swallow it. Then you begin to look at it differently. And you really have to think of it as a blue pill, red pill dynamic and really kind of reverse it. And this is ultimately the solution that I think is men's problems. Men need to turn these things around and start to, actively go out in the world with their own understanding, this difference, and use it to their advantage, which may or may not be what, say, Game, for example, is doing, because I really haven't had the chance to look into Game yet. But these are my perceptions. But ultimately, to really tie this down, sex comes from the woman. Sex, she is the personification of sex. She's a physical personification of it. But that's really what I think, and that's really, I think, what happens. I think there's probably considerable evidence that women do have their sex drives and things like that, and that's gonna be a whole other issue. There's other aspects of this that I wanted to talk about, because then I'd have to get into the physical side of it, the details of it, women needing sex, things like that. Well, actually, I should point this out just before I try to wrap this up here, because this is actually important. I just thought of it. You find that most of these this is a really good example, actually. You find that most of these sexual disorders, considerable amount of them anyway, not just mere sex addiction, but nymphomania. There's another one, I forget what it's called, genital something or other, where there's just this constant orgasmic thing. You find that there are women who who have this, and sometimes you find this stuff almost seems to only really exist among women than among men. I mean, if men were wired for sex that much, you would find that men would be needing it. Men would be having these problems, but women have them because ultimately their sexuality comes from within their body. just how they're wired. So obviously, sex is just much more for a woman than it is for a man. Sex is outside of a man, but for a woman, sex is inside her. All these things are very important to consider. But I guess that's all I really have to say on this so far. I probably will discuss more of this issue at a later point, maybe in future videos. But that's pretty much all I have to say, and that's it. I'll talk to you later. Bye.